Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. Today I want to talk about accents. It's a subject that comes up all the time. Which accent should we learn? Does it matter? For example, in Spanish, in English, in French, and in all languages, there are different accents. Which accent should we learn? Does it matter? Things of this nature. It comes up to some extent because I'm going to Latin America. I had a conversation and we were talking about different accents, Argentinian, Mexican, Spanish, and of course the same is true in English. We have, American, North American, Southern, Scottish, Australian. What about all this stuff? Before I get into that, though, I just want to confirm again that, I'm going to be in South America, and I'm happy to have meetups or meet with people, talk about language learning, but I'm going to be traveling with my wife and another couple, so the best, of course, is if people there who want to get together organize something, let me know, and then we can find something that works. The dates, I'm going to put them in. I'm going to put a link, in fact, in the description box to a thread at our forum at Link, LINGQ, where I ask people to let me know if they want to get together. And the dates are Buenos Aires. Basically, what's available is October 3 or 4 or October 8, 9, 10 in Buenos Aires. In Rio, it's October 13 to 17. Salvador, so October 18 and 19, and Lima, October 26th through 28. So check the link and let me know if you want to get together. Accents. It also came up because apparently there's a dispute, not a dispute, but there are teachers who are non-native speaking teachers, mostly of English, who feel that they are somehow treated unfairly. And so then there was a comment about, is there any evidence that if a teacher has an accent that it could adversely affect the learner? Or if a non-native speaking teacher of English or any language makes a mistake, would that adversely affect the learner? So kind of throwing these things all together, I think that any one teacher, any one source of audio or text, any mistake has very little impact over the course of your learning. People get all bent out of shape because there's some incorrect, grammar in some text somewhere that a learner is using. It doesn't really matter, in my opinion, because I know in my own experience, I'm exposed to so much material, so many different people, and even native speakers make mistakes. So that in the end, it doesn't matter as long as you do enough listening and reading. It won't matter much. And when we deal with the issue of accents, I must admit that when I learn another language, initially I'm not that aware of different accents. I'm focused on words and meaning. And many learners, I would think, of Spanish in an initial period have trouble telling whether it's from Spain or from Mexico or from Colombia or whatever. And that in time they become more aware of these differences in pronunciation. They may find some people easier to understand than others. It might be how quickly they speak or whatever. But then in time, if a person really wants to speak, he's going to live in Colombia, he wants to speak like a Colombian, wants to understand the Colombians, then at some point it's probably a good idea to focus on the accent that is most useful for you. If you're going to be working in Quebec, then you should probably focus on making sure you understand the accent in Quebec, and probably you want to sound a little bit more like a Quebecer, because that will be more sympathetic from the perspective of the people you're dealing with. So it really depends on what your needs are. And so therefore at some point you probably should focus on one form, one accent, and try to really get into the rhythm and the intonation and the pronunciation of that accent. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen to other accents, because acquiring words and acquiring a familiarity with the language is kind of the basic task. So that and plus you should, even if you're going to be living in Argentina, you should be able to understand people from Spain or Chile. If you're going to be living in Australia, you should still be able to understand people from Scotland. So it's useful to also expose yourself to these other accents, in my view. And certainly in the beginning, I don't think it matters very much. But at some point, as a strategy, you may say, okay, I want to focus on this form of the language because that's where I'm going to be and that's what's going to be most useful for me. I'll just touching briefly on this idea of non-native speaking teachers. I mean, people have prejudices. So I'm sure there are situations where a school would rather, like in Japan, they might prefer to have a Dutchman with his Dutch accent as opposed to a native speaker who looks Asian, say an Asian Canadian, which is, of course, extremely unfair and demonstrates prejudice on the part of the school. But maybe they feel, I'm learning English, that's the language of the white people, therefore I want a teacher who's of European origin, which, of course, is silly. However, if you're learning, say, Chinese, would you rather learn from someone who looks European or someone who looks Chinese? Now, of course, if they are both non-native speakers, personally, I would make no difference. I prefer to learn from native speakers. I find it more motivating to learn from native speakers because to me the learning process is largely listening and reading, and any questions I have on grammar or usage, I can look them up, and then I go back to doing my listening and reading. And then at some point I want to engage people in conversation, and it's more motivating for me to be doing this with a native speaker. But in a classroom where you have a teacher who's trying to encourage people, motivate them, stimulate them, inspire them, help them, pick them up when they feel frustrated, I don't think it really matters whether it's a native speaker or a non-native speaker. I don't think these things matter. I think for the independent learner, we should respect the choice of the independent learner like me. I just find that if I get the language from a native speaker, that to me is just more credible, more motivating, more credible. So I would only listen to audio with a native speaker. That's what turns me on. I might consume content written by a non-native speaker because I'm interested in the subject matter, but as a deliberate choice in language learning, I would prefer the native speaker. But that's not to say that a non-native speaker can't be very competent in the language, and we have many examples of non-native speakers who use, say, English better than many native speakers. I mean, the one example that pops to mind is, of course, Joseph Conrad, who was a phenomenal author in the English language and apparently had a Polish accent until the end of his days. So, I mean, it's the language. I can't immediately think of them, but there are, Samuel Beckett, who is an Irishman, he wrote in French. So anyone can learn to use a language very well and theoretically can teach the language as well as, say, a native speaker. But I think we also should respect the motivation and the preferences of the learner. So there you have it. What I did today was I talked briefly about my trip to South America. Please check the link. If you're interested in participating in some kind of a gathering in one of those cities, please come to our forum at Link. You'll see a link to Link. I talked about, accents and why I think people make too much of a deal about it when they're starting out, whereas at a later stage they should probably focus on the form of the language that's going to be most useful for them. And then I touched briefly on this controversy surrounding non-native speakers of the language. So a bit of a ramble, and I hope to see some of you in South America. Bye for now.